Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Freethought Hour, our chat show. And as usual, we have Tercia, who's in the winter of South Africa right now. How the devil are you, Tercia?
I'm good, thank you, John. I'm well. And
Good.
you are still a little bit phlegmy, but getting over, we presuming is COVID?
Yeah, it's taking a while to shake off, I'm afraid, but I'm getting there. I can notice an improvement.
We will not say that the effect on your hearing is due to you having turned 42 on Tuesday. Am I right?
Well, I do know that this is, on this occasion, this is congestion in the Eustachian tube, because I can feel it in there, and when I hold my nose and blow, you get the effect of it briefly clearing. And it's like when you're flying, and you go up to a different pressure.
So it's not due to you.
It's not due to my vast age, not on this occasion.
Okay.
Although, to be honest, I have lost some hearing in recent years. Yeah.
I suppose it's inevitable, but I know that
it's not disabled yet.
I'm glad you had a good birthday, and you turned 42. 42 roundabout, give or take a couple of years. So
I think it's 40 and 2 come into it, but I think there's a multiplication sign.
Well, we do hope that you hang around for another couple of years.
Thank you.
That they're good years, and that they're healthy, and that you keep it up, John. Keep it up.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
We like what you're doing.
Well, we enjoy it over here too. Yeah. So, shall we introduce our guest, who is he's got up early for us because he is in the Antipodes. Peter, how the devil are you?
Hi, good.
Yeah, it's coffee time where you are.
Yeah, it's for me it'd probably be a little bit late. I usually get up about 5 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, here at 7:30 a.m. Normally it would be a bit late and sort of like after breakfast time, but no, we're all good.
Good.
I actually had a bit of a lay-in.
I see. Okay. Well, I ought to tell Tercia that you and I have actually met because I've visited New Zealand a couple of times to stay with my son, who's been living there for 20 years, and on those occasions when I was in Auckland, I spoke to the rationalist and, let me get this right, the Rationalist and Humanist New Zealand Rationalist and Humanist Association.
Yeah, a bit of a mouthful. We usually just call it the Rationalists at this point, but the formal term is New Zealand Association of Rationalists and Humanists.
Yes. I know I always get it wrong. Anyway, I did speak to that organization. At the time, you were the chairman of it or the president of it?
Yes. I was. I spent 4 years as president. But basically been involved since 2010. Sort of like joined them. Just happened to walk by and see the rationalists on the side of the building, and sort of like became involved, and eventually became president for 4 years. Also, I was involved. I was the editor for a time as well, so basically producing the journal. And I also began the Secular Education Network, which is probably the most important part. I thought was, it was a form of outreach and doing something in the public which really made a difference to people's lives.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome.
Well, Tercia and I are both teachers. I'm a retired one and she's an active one. So we'll be interested in the Secular Education Network. But first of all, tell us about you, because I'm not sure what backstory you've got, because I know that you've been actively atheistic. Is that the right description? For some time?
Yeah, I've always been an atheist since I was since birth. I was brought up in a Presbyterian family, though, so we went to school. Sorry, I went to the church every week. I went to Boys Brigade, and yeah, so there's a whole lot of activities which were sort of like church related, and I never really, although the family was religious, and I was taught a whole lot of Christian ideals. It never really took on me. I really never believed in God. I really didn't understand the stories and how they could be true at all. So, yeah, it's never been an issue for me, and there's never really been a problem in the family with that.
Yeah.
And frankly, until I joined the Rationalists, it really wasn't a big part of my life at all. Actually, what I tell you, there was one moment actually that really put me on this path. And that was I had to go to a lawyer in order to get something witnessed.
Oh,
And when I went to the lawyer, they expected me to swear on the Bible. And I couldn't believe that in today and age, that I'd have to swear on a Bible in order to get something witnessed. And the reality is that you don't. You can actually just affirm. But the lawyer insisted on me doing this on the Bible. And I thought, well, I couldn't do anything about it at the time, but later on I'm going to come back to that, and and I did in quite a big way. So the other thing was hearing a story of people being discriminated against because they didn't want to be going to the they took their children out of the school, out of the Christian classes, and they were discriminated against in class. So I think those were the two things that sort of like put me along the lines of, to actually be, become actively atheist and actually, become president. It was all about the fact that it wasn't just the fact that Christianity exists, or, like I don't have a particular problem with people believing false things. We all do, I think, at some level. But the fact that people were discriminating against others because of that particular belief, that's really what I was involved or became involved with before.
I would have said that New Zealand is very enlightened. It's a noticeably highly tolerant society until there was that event. Where was it? In Christchurch, which was a horrible shooting or something. I can't remember.
Geez, yeah. No, that wasn't. I don't want to portray New Zealand as being some kind of utopia, which is patently ridiculous. I mean, yes, it is. I think it is more tolerant, perhaps, than many other countries. It certainly has many. I think it is more tolerant in many ways. The particular shooting that you're talking about was someone who came over here deliberately to perform that terrorist act. It wasn't a New Zealander, and I'm not saying that New Zealanders are incapable of that kind of act, but it wasn't a New Zealander, in fact. And it is very atypical. Like I don't know that there's many extremist organizations which harbor that kind of violent intent in New Zealand, if any.
Yeah. Well, my son always portrays it to me as a very child-friendly country, where it's good to raise children safely, and there's lots of facilities and so on.
Oh, it's much better than Australia. We don't have anything poisonous or venomous, other than a few spiders. Yeah, not the whole thing's not out to kill you, so it's always a bonus.
No. Kiwis' bites are negligible.
Yeah.
I want to just get back to your shall we call it your move from atheist passivism, or a passive atheist, to more of an atheist or an activism for a secular society. I went onto the Facebook page of the Secular Education Network, and I love that concept. In fact, I started a similar organization in South Africa some years ago. COVID sort of interfered with what I had planned to do. But in South Africa, it's definitely more than 1/3 of children who are indoctrinated in school, at school, by educators. and by people from religious communities who have free access to the school. But I was surprised to read on the Facebook page of the Secular Education Network that 1/3 approximately, and it might be higher. So it's always difficult to judge those or to really determine those numbers. But it's interesting to me that was the one event that made you become more proactive to instill the values of rationalism and secularism. So how has that organization grown? I did read some comments, and it's very similar to what we find in South Africa. And have you been engaged in any form of litigation? Have you had any success stories about people who were discriminated against? Do you actually go into schools and educate school boards about how to treat the subject of religion in schools?
Yeah, so the organization, in terms of the actual number of people involved, has fallen off a bit, and it's probably we'll go a step back. There was a terrible event in the not too distant past where we actually won in terms of legislative change. So in New Zealand, the law has changed so that children need to actively opt into these classes rather than being included by default. And this, if you ask the legislators, they probably would say that we didn't really have any influence, but we did have a pretty significant mind share, if you like, in New Zealand. We were actually putting up adverts and especially very active online, and the media. We had a lot of media play because it was quite a controversial issue. So yeah, we did actually have quite a lot of mind share at one point. Then the government basically came along and they basically changed the law so that it would be an opt-in system. The problem with the opt-in system, however, is that there's no real regulation around it. So there's no government agency making sure that the law is followed, or that there's no discrimination going on.
Exactly the same in South Africa.
Yeah, it was a little bit, the very minimum they could do, and I think there's still a role for us to make sure that we monitor it and make sure that they're actually abiding by that. Also, from there's members of our organisation which would rather just get rid of any kind of religious instruction in schools, whether it's after school or not. Basically just remove it. And I have some sympathy for that. The state shouldn't really be in the position of trying to indoctrinate children at all, or enable others to do so. So while that's true, the difficulty is how do you, that was quite a big move for a government to do, and could potentially alienate their voters. And I think that was the reason why the particular the halfway mark, which was just this change in policy, I think was something that was achievable, and something that has actually had a rather major impact on has had a major impact on the rate of the number of children attending these things. So like you said, we started off at about 33% thereabouts. There's been a major drop off, basically because now that there's a much people have to think about it and actually agree to it, and have formal assent to be able to take their children along there. And just that by itself has undermined the whole enterprise.
That is so interesting. I want to ask you something else about religion in New Zealand society. My husband he played club rugby in Te Awamutu, which is, I think it's South Island, I'm not sure, but that was in the in 1994. In fact, he voted for the first time while he was in New Zealand, in our democratic elections. And what I know of what he told me of his experience living in New Zealand for 9 months is that he experienced hardly anybody as being religious in any way. But what I've noticed in the last couple of years, and I'm wondering whether this is anecdotal. Obviously, I've noticed that as far as the New Zealand rugby players are concerned, many more of them display. Like when they've scored a try, they will do the prayer or the. Do you think that there's an increase in religiosity in New Zealand society, in at least
No,
in terms
good
of,
grief, no.
not
No,
okay? Well, that's good
no,
news.
no.
Just on the
There may
rugby
be
field.
an increase. I think there may be. There's the kind of American fundamentalism has come through a bit. So we've seen an increase in like what you were talking about in terms of outward showing of Christianity. I think, but the number of Christians in New Zealand is dropping rapidly, as you know,
Okay.
the census is clearly showing. So you know, the actual religiosity of New Zealanders in total is definitely reducing, and that's certainly amongst the case of Maori and Pacifica, who ironically are seen as very religious, but in fact, you know, they have roughly the same kind of religiosity as the general population.
Well, I'm glad you haven't got the problem that Europe has at the moment, which is an invasion of other religions, particularly Islam. I don't know if you've noticed the news that's going on, the protest marches and assemblies that are happening.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, but by the protest marches, you mean around Israel and
Yeah.
yeah. That's difficult. So you know, my position is that I don't support any kind of fundamentalist, violent organization. So you know, things like theocratic societies that you know impose death sentences for blasphemy and so on are obviously, you know, there's no way I'd ever support that. At the same time, you know, as a humanist, I'm very concerned about any kind of situation where there are people being murdered or bombed and that. So, you know, like it's difficult because I think in the modern context, you're kind of made to take sides in that kind
Yeah.
of conflict, and
Yes.
I don't, you know, I'm not really in a position where I'm going to say, well, I'm going to, you know, say I'm going to side with a theocratic regime, but at the same time, you know, the idea of not bombing women and children is not exactly a hard idea to understand.
No.
I mean, it's a complex situation, and
Yeah.
frankly, you know, it's beyond my pay grade. I don't,
Yeah. I agree.
you know, like I don't have any solutions, and you know, there's been, I guess my only observation is that there's been a long-term hatred built up against different religious and cultural groups,
Yeah.
and that hatred between each other is what's driving this. And you're not really going to solve this unless you get to the roots of those hatreds and try and address those.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to be a bloodbath until you know we see the kind of devastating news on that we see today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much more to add to that, and yeah, it's. I know what you mean. I mean, I can see other. Well, I'll switch it up a bit. So one of the things I was quite closely involved with when I was at the Rationalists was trying to help people who were trying to escape theocracies. So you know, we had people coming from Saudi Arabia, for example, and helping them basically get established and go through the process of refugee status in New Zealand. And we were really closely involved with helping people in that regard. So, you know, from a rationalist and humanist point of view, the idea is to help people, you know, even if, you know, especially escaping from those kinds of theocracies. So, you know, there's no doubt that's you know, my particular ethos is around helping people and you know, trying to achieve freedom.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, that's basically what I'm all about.
The thing about the situation here in Europe is we're seen as an attractive destination economically, if not, you know, theologically. So we have an enormous rate of immigrants. I mean, we have in this country, in the UK, we have somebody arriving at the rate of about 1 a minute.
Yeah, to be honest, John, you're talking about something I'm not familiar with in terms of, well, I know it's happening, but I really haven't really a thoughtful position around.
Well, I'm glad, because my son's in your country. I don't want it to be spoiled in the way that we fear that we are being here in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment.
I think. I mean, I know the issue. Like for example, a lot of Syrians were displaced, and they came into Europe, and they were sort of like accepted, but they have a whole lot of different cultural norms, and you've got a bit of a clash in terms of what the expectations are.
That's right.
So yeah, you're going to get that, and I think the problem from the Syrian situation was caused by forces outside their control. So the situation in the first place was caused by external factors. Yeah, I don't know. Again, you're not talking about easy answers there, are you?
No, absolutely not. So can we change the subject? Can we talk about your career? Because
I was just going to
good.
say, can we talk about something simple like artificial intelligence? I mean, let's just go. Just go.
Yeah. to my real passion at the moment. So perhaps I should start with I'm interested in artificial intelligence safety, and probably safety is not quite the right word, actually. So people are concerned that that we're going to get into some kind of dystopian hellscape where the machines are going to come and hunt humans down. So I should probably say right off the bat that this isn't what I'm talking about, or at least I don't see that as the future. What I do see as the potential future is that humans will continue to lose their jobs to machines, and that we're going to come up into a crisis. So the crisis being humans need money in order to maintain their lifestyle, and even though the machines will look useful in the beginning because they're going to be able to do all these jobs and help us out, much like the first industrial revolution, but as they take over more and more roles and humans are unable to compete, we enter this kind of like crisis state where what are the humans going to do, and how do our economic systems work?
Because for a while it looked as though the machines would only be involved in the field of sort of data crunching and mechanical operations rather than the field of creativity. But now with AI,
that was fascinating to me. The expectation for machine learning was that it was going to do all of the drudgery, boring things first, all the autonomic things. The very last cab off the rank was going to be the creative jobs. So it was definitely expected that the creative roles were going to be completely the last out the door, and before that you were going to automate all of the low level blue collar works. That's completely the opposite. So all the blue collar jobs are generally quite safe because they're involving dynamic work in the real world, dealing with the physical world, where many of the creative roles are actually digital these days. So they've been actually quite easy to address. And furthermore, there's a misunderstanding about what AI was. People had the idea that it's programmed. For example, if you look at even sci-fi, you'll see the machine can't do that because they're not programmed to do that. So machines, especially AI today, are not programmed in that sense at all.
Sorry, Peter, I want to interrupt here because this is my husband and I. My husband is a mechanical engineer, and we spent the greater part of this evening talking about what is artificial intelligence, and is there a difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning? Is machine learning a subdiscipline
Okay.
of art? So could you just explain to a language teacher like me, what exactly does artificial intelligence mean? And is it just my husband was actually asking, we were discussing, is something like ChatGPT, for example, is it not just a very sophisticated search engine?
No. Okay. I'll address that.
So could you speak to that for a bit, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when we're talking about artificial intelligence, that field's been around for a long time, and it's included systems which were programmed in the way I was talking about earlier. Like ELIZA programs or Dr. Watson. There's a lot of programs which were quite mechanical in that sense. So there's also been things like genetic algorithms. There's a lot of classes of AI which were solving problems using statistical methods. One of those was neural networks, but it wasn't very successful. So for the longest time, there's been a whole raft of different approaches to artificial intelligence. And so I'll define what artificial intelligence means at the broad level. Basically, it's anything which is doing a kind of intellectual job that would normally require a human to do, right? So it's you could almost consider computers in general to be a kind of artificial intelligence in that way, in the broader sense. Mm-hmm. But the way we're talking about it these days tends to be more focused on the artificial intelligence that's coming from neural networks. So when you're talking about machine learning, you're talking about a neural network usually, and that neural network has been trained rather than programmed. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, the way we develop these systems isn't meticulous design by a human being. Rather, it's supplying data into a neural network, and the neural network is trained, and then after it's been trained, it will behave in a certain reasonably predictable way. But it's not robustly predictable in the same way if you used a programming language, for example.
Okay.
So what we've got now is that we've got the large language models that we see now. That's just been scaled up many billions of times. So they've used huge amounts of data, and this it's also been unlabeled data, so it hasn't really been curated very well. Basically they've just taken huge tracts of text and things, and they've just jammed it into these models. And the intelligence, if you like, has emerged from those models. And that's the surprising thing. That's what I didn't expect. I mean, I've been a huge fan of AI for years, and I didn't think it would be the case that just by ramming a whole bunch of text into a model, that you would get something cogent coming out the other end. That was actually a great surprise, and it took me a little while to actually get the idea that it was real and it wasn't just some kind of parlor trick.
Yeah. Can I give an example of that? Because I'm writing a book at the moment, and it's in two parts. So I discovered that if you put your text into ChatGPT and ask it to do a review, it will give you an evaluation of what you've written, and it'll do it like that. It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's probably a little bit unimaginative, though. I mean, it looks, like if you do that for multiple texts, you'll see that there's a commonality there. I perhaps know programming reviews best, and so often I'll give ask for a review of a particular piece of code, for example, for what I'm doing. And it will give sensible results out, but they typically won't be very inventive, and they probably won't pick up the kind of nuance that I'd expect a human developer to. So yeah, it's remarkable. First of all, it's remarkable that it could do it at all, right? Yeah. I mean, the fact that it can do these things is just mind blowing. This has been pure science fiction up to 5 years ago. right?
Yes.
It just, the expectation that it would get to this fast is just
Yeah.
remarkable.
And
I think
fast.
this is,
Fast is the key word there, isn't it? Because the other remarkable thing is the speed with which it can come out with the result.
well, yeah, it's only remarkable. In that sense, though, you have to remember that human beings are about 1,000,000 times slower than computers in terms of their thinking speed, right? So they're with human neurons, they can switch only about 200 times a second, right? So your neurons themselves, if they're switching, and this is not their average speed. This is like the total maximum speed that they can switch is about 200 a second. Whereas a machine is, running up to 3 gigahertz. So there's a slight difference in terms of their performance.
Peter, do you think that the fact that we are using computers to do so much thinking for us, and that they can often do it faster than we can do it, do you think in the long term, perhaps the greatest threat to humanity from artificial intelligence is that the human race as a whole is very fast becoming less intelligent than we used to be, and that our own the ways in which we can synthesize and solve problems and use information to solve problems is going to decline as amongst the general population to such an extent that only a very small number of people like programmers or people who work in fields of artificial intelligence will have any form of intelligence remaining, and that the rest of us will just be basically,
I'll make a distinction.
That is perhaps the greatest threat to humanity.
I'll make a distinction between intelligence and education. So I think what you're talking about there is that the education system has seen a decline. I think Carl Sagan talked about it in terms of, the kind of, we've become a technological society, but fewer and fewer people are able to understand the technology and how to build it.
So when calculators were invented, the need to learn maths tables, multiplication tables, was lost. It was disappeared.
Yes, but I mean, people still understand what multiplication is, right? Even if they can't necessarily do it long form.
Well, you'd be surprised. So, Peter, that's why I'm asking this question. I'm a teacher. I work with children, ages 12 to 17, and what I find is that they literally, not only do they not know their multiplication tables, which is fine. I mean, but they literally don't understand the concept of multiplication. And what ends up happening, and this is, once again, it's anecdotal, that's as far as math is concerned. So because they know that I will get a maths problem that'll be of this nature, and I'll use a calculator to solve that problem, the concepts of multiplication and division are never.
They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, so basically it's just a whole lot of symbols, and it's just all gibberish to them in terms of what they're understanding.
And the same happens with language. So what I find is, they can't read with any form of understanding, and this is very general. And I know that is not just anecdotal. There was research done last year in South Africa that indicated that something like 82% of 10-year-olds cannot read with understanding. And I prescribe that in part to the fact that they don't have to read and they don't have to write. So because even when they write something, they literally just go onto ChatGPT and they ask for, and they copy it in their own handwriting. And most teachers don't even look at it and tell them, listen, this is not your work. And they don't understand what they're reading. They can put the words together, they can make the sounds, but they can't read and they can't write.
Well, the imperative to understand, to comprehend, is gone if you can press a button and get the answer.
Exactly.
I
So
think,
it's not only that they don't understand the technology, it's that they literally don't have the conceptual understanding. And I'm worried that is going to cause our extinction in the long run. So I don't know what you think about that.
I think I remember a quote from a particular Roman senator who was saying very much similar things about the youth of his day. I'm not particularly concerned. I'm not particularly concerned about the youth of today becoming less intelligent. I think there's a certain perspective bias in terms of how we see the past in much rosier terms than the modern day. It may be. I'm not saying that there isn't a problem. I think there probably is a problem in terms of the quality of education going on. I don't have any particular solutions with that aspect. I guess my concern is that the relative differences between machines and people is growing because machines, they're improving exponentially.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Isn't that the point? Because when fountain pens were invented, the ability to write well with chalk on a blackboard disappeared. But what's happening here is a real acceleration. This is, as you said, exponential. That's the problem,
yeah,
isn't it?
so exponential change isn't new either, right? So we've been experiencing it over the last 100 years. It wasn't long ago that we had that planes were invented. So how long have we had flight? It's not that long.
About 120 years.
Just over 100 years, yeah. So
Yeah.
in the last 100 years, we've gone from a relatively, it was technological, but the very nascent technologies, to technologies which have seen us, obviously go to the moon 50 years ago. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But we've now got to the point where our machines are capable of being a facsimile of human beings in terms of speech. So I actually had a bet with someone in New Zealand that we would reach AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, by the end of 2021. The criteria for that was whether it would pass the Turing test. Now, other people were saying at the time we entered that bet, which was in 2017, that I was off by a factor of decades and decades, and that would it wouldn't be before 2050 or even far longer. Well, I lost the bet, but only by a couple of years, because now it's very clear that it's passing the Turing test.
Yeah. Well, the Turing test isn't strict enough, is it? We want to
No, I said at the time, absolutely. No, I said at the time that this isn't a good criteria, right?
Yeah.
I understood in the bet that the Turing test could be cheated. There's a lot of ways which it really wasn't very adequate, and so I didn't have a much better idea of what true general intelligence looked like, other than to say I know it when I see it. Now, the interesting thing was when ChatGPT came along. At first, I was kind of incredulous. I saw, if you remember Blake Lemoine, he saw the early versions of Google's models, and he was claiming that they were intelligent. Like it was tricking. Well, not tricking him, but he thought it was true intelligence.
Yeah. There's been quite a few people who've been sucked in by that idea.
It's not sucked in, dude. I mean, if you, I think at this point. Okay, so the problem here is my conclusion is that the judgment of whether something's intelligent is a subjective view of a particular behavior. There's nothing inherent. Let's go back to comparing machines and human beings. We're both made of physical stuff, right? So in the human brain, there are neurons, and the neurons are made of physical atoms, and there's nothing inherently about neurons that makes them conscious, right? So there's nothing about a neuron that would tell you that it's conscious or that it's part of a conscious system. It's only when you put billions and billions together and connect them with synapses that somehow there's an emergent property of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so when you look at a machine, there's nothing inherently inside the silicon which is going to tell you that this is conscious. But if we create these models, somehow something comes out which is behaving in a way, and it's emergent in the same way that the intelligence in human beings is emergent. Now, it's
But
not the same. It's not. I just want to be clear. It's not
Yeah.
quite the same. There are some things that it's not doing that are important to human beings, which make us different. But there are far more similarities between us and the LLMs than most people would like to admit.
Yeah.
LLM, can you just explain that? Did I hear
Uh,
correct?
That's short for large language model. So we're talking about, the Chat GPT, Llama, Claude. So there's a whole bunch of them now.
Yeah.
Very
It's a
similar
sort
to
of
one another.
huge development of what we used to call autocorrect.
No. So
No?
this again, this is an argument. Basically, is it just predicting the next word? Well, yes, it's predicting the next word in the same way that you're predicting the next word. It's coming up with. It's a neural network, much the same way as that you're a neural network, and much the same way that you're processing and determining what you're going to say after I stop speaking. It's doing pretty much the same kind of thing.
Okay, so
right?
definitely, it's different. What I can tell my husband is that it's definitely not just a very much upscaled search engine. That's
no, it's definitely not that. It's not a database. It's not. Yeah.
Okay, and it's also not just it's not entirely programmed anymore. Is it sort of programming?
It's not programmed. So I mean, the agent that you're talking with hasn't been programmed. There is programming involved in terms of running the neural network, right? But that's kind of at the level of, if you were to liken it to how humans are, that would be like, it's like the plumbing or the synapses. So there's programming which runs everything at a very low level. But don't think of that as it's basically the substrate. It's like what holds the entire network together, and what runs it.
But surely the one seismic difference between silicon and biological brains is flexibility. We can reconnect, disconnect, make new connections between our neurons, and processors can't. They are fixed in their relationships.
Okay, so you're quite right. The existing models, once they've been trained, are static. And you're completely correct that the one limitation that they suffer from at the moment is the fact that they can't learn in real time. They're not dynamic thinkers. They can't learn from a discussion, for example. So when you're talking with ChatGPT or any of the other models, nothing you say is going to be retained. Now, some of them do a facsimile of this by storing data about what you've said in the past and then replaying it when they do when they get into a conversation. But this isn't the same thing as learning and actually modifying the weights of the model. And I think this is absolutely fundamental to the way humans operate. So if you can you have an analogy? Can you think of something where there's a human being who is incapable of changing their model weights? What would that person be in terms of a living human being?
A dogmatic fundamentalist.
No, that's not fair. No. I was being serious. And the thing is, someone who has Alzheimer's and can't form memories is like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they can have memories of the past, and you can have discussions with them, at least in the early stages of Alzheimer's. You can have discussions with them. They can't form new memories, but they've got their past memories, and so you can have discussions with them, but they can't. They find it very difficult to function because if they're cooking dinner, they don't remember where they are in terms of the meal preparation, for example. So I lived with someone with Alzheimer's for quite a while. As they were getting worse, and it was obviously one, distressing, but two, it was interesting in terms of how that impacts their ability to function. right?
Yes.
And I think we're seeing the same thing in LLM models as well. Is like it's all very well being able to answer someone's question when asked, and carry on a brief conversation, but the real utility in the everyday people is their ability to learn and retain information from on an ongoing basis. In other words, they have like a continuous experience, and they're able to learn from experiences.
Yeah. Whereas ChatGPT wouldn't remember the conversation we had yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're changing that in terms of they're storing the data, but it doesn't incorporate ideas into its matrix, into its network. So if you have a discussion, for example, about some complex theory or some complex topic, then it's not incorporating that information into its core neural network in order to be able to modify its thinking.
Yeah. So we've got people now who want you to predict the future. We've got some questions that I'm going to put up, see whether you're able to give us a steer.
Sure.
Take a look at this.
Quantum computers, is that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so quantum computers are very niche technology. So they'll be used for things like breaking encryption because of their ability to do large factorials. They're almost entirely useless for any major application on a day-to-day basis. So we have true quantum computers now. They're just very, very limited application, and they're not likely to be any use at all.
And huge and have to be kept very cold.
Yeah, like implausibly. Yeah. There's nothing they're going to do in the short term that will be any use for us on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, you're not going to see a. Sorry.
I was going to say something that James touches upon in the second part of his question is, do you think that that the computers will become self-aware? And that I think is one of the questions that futurists grapple with. Because how will we know? And I just want you to explain very briefly, if you don't mind, Peter, what exactly does the Turing test involve? I mean, I've heard of it, and I think I have sort of, is it basically like a machine that can, when you have an interaction with this machine, you'd be able to realize it's a machine I'm talking to? Is that basically what the Turing test boils down to, very oversimplified?
Yes, it was the general idea was that if you were, let's say, the only communication you had was by typing, if there's a human on one end and then there's either a human or a machine on the other, could the person typing distinguish between whether it was a human or a machine? If you get to the point where they can't tell, then that's passing the Turing test. That was the fundamental concept behind it.
Yeah.
Of course, the thing is, I mean, you could have a completely unaware thing, something that can basically fake it on the other side. The thesis was, well, but surely you could have something on the other side which is just like a Chinese machine. It takes in data on one side and outputs it on the other, and really has no concept of what it means internally. The thing is, that could be true, but maybe we're that as well. I mean, there's only atoms in here, right? The atoms don't understand fundamentally. No. It's only the emergent behavior of the entire system as a whole that results in this.
Sorry, go ahead.
You brought up self-awareness, and so there's a few words I think that we should probably talk about. They're all kind of almost synonymous. One is consciousness, there's self-awareness and sentience, which I'm going to bring those all those things together. They may have slight differences in terms of their definitions, but they're all talking about, I think, the same fundamental idea, and that is, isn't a particular agent, does it have that kind of moral value? In other words, we give humans a moral value that they're worth something in terms of having rights. And so when does a machine be considered to be having self-awareness and consciousness and sentience? And the problem here is that you can't look at the internal state and figure that out. There's no way, if you look at a brain and you look at all the atoms and the neurons and everything, it's very difficult to look at that and figure out that the resulting thing is a consciousness. What you're looking at is the subjective decision, or sorry, the subjective view of some other agent externally. So in other words, if you're looking at someone, you judge whether they're alive and sentient and conscious from their behaviors. And there is no scientifically valid way to distinguish that easily, right? So if you have a machine, a robot, which is doing all the same things as a human, and you say, oh, well, but it's just a machine. It's like, well, yeah, but so are humans in that sense, because they're just made of meat and, neurons and, so there's nothing about a human which is magical, which makes it conscious, other than the fact that it's being observed by another human or something which can judge it. So
yes, it's behavior that determines whether we think something is conscious or not. And it's like you said, the sad case of an Alzheimer's person, they gradually lose their awareness. And what was the other thing you said that I wanted to bring to this at the moment? Carry on talking, I'll think of it.
Yeah, so in terms of Alzheimer's, it's a very good question about, what is the core, what's the core aspect that makes a person a person? And you see in Alzheimer's, slowly the person is eradicated in terms of, they lose who they are.
Well, that's right. And it's a progression. It isn't a switch.
Yeah.
So, although you said, I know it when I see it, when it's diminishing, whereabouts do you stop seeing it?
Yeah, I think there is no, obviously in the case of Alzheimer's, it's one, no one would want to say that, their loved one is gone or not present when they're still alive. But that is very much the way they feel. There's kind of like a death before death, that people feel that their loved one is slipping away from them and they're no longer present. And that's very sad. I kind of want to switch back to the machines in that respect. So how, if you have an LLM which is behaving in a way which appears to be intelligent, why would we not? Because it's, if it appears to be, and that's the impression we get, surely that's the same way we would judge a human being. So the difficulty is that we've got a lot of people saying, well, it's going to be, a long time before we get true AGI. But the question is, what's the difference between the current LLMs and human beings right now? That means that we would judge one not self-aware and conscious, and the other one is. And I think that's my interest at the moment is getting back to what we were bringing up earlier, and is that learning process. I think the existing LLMs don't learn, and I think that's really critical in order to be able to have a machine which is able to have that ongoing lived experience. And I think once they're able to do that, then there's a chance that we're going to get the same kind of actual experience that we experience.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Pope at the moment he's set up a council to determine what criteria should be used to judge whether a miracle is real or not. And we're in a similar sort of situation here with these computers. What is it that is going to trigger our decision about whether it's self-aware or not?
So this is going to be different for different people, right? I don't think there's going to be there's not going to be one agreed definition that's going to be true for all people. It's going to be, look, you have people now developing relationships with machines. They're having conversations with them like they're real people. I mean, I've just done it myself. But like that kind of discrimination, it's like a real person. It's like, well, aren't they real? Obviously they're not a human being, but when do we give them the kind of rights and agency that we give to human beings? And
I think as with many issues, the question is ultimately going to be who makes those decisions. and I think that's perhaps what needs to be considered. I just want to ask you, in the final in the closing minutes, do you think that artificial intelligence poses a threat to humanity or our existence on this planet in any way?
No question.
Can we outsmart ourselves with the machines that we build? And I'm also not thinking in terms of this dystopian Terminator type scenario. I'm just thinking, is there something that we cannot foresee because we haven't thought this through? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this. I was watching a YouTube video yesterday where this chap asked 3 different, I suppose, LLM models. I don't know what's the difference between an LLM model and AI, but he asked these 3 LLM models the question, what are the odds that artificial intelligence will destroy humanity? And the 3 models all said, well, it's between 60 and 70%, which is quite an odd. He made a whole video about it. It was about 25 minutes long. So what do you think? Do you think there is a threat, even if it's only in the sense that we can't foresee what could happen?
I'm going to reflect back on you. So assuming we get to the point where we have machines which are more intelligent than human beings in every way, like they have the same kind of experiential abilities, maybe there's even robots and things. If we get to that point, and they're dramatically more intelligent than human beings, what do you think, from your knowledge of the past and history, will happen to human beings at that point?
I don't know. I suppose it depends on the morality of these beings, because you can be highly intelligent, but completely immoral. I don't know.
So the thing is, in every situation where human beings have been in the same situation, like the Europeans coming to the Americas, or the culture that's being that's encountering those creatures doesn't come off well, right?
Yeah.
And that's with human beings. So, like, let's say it was the Europeans coming to New Zealand, for example. They had no inherently superior intellect, right? So basically, all human beings within a certain degree have the same kind of intellectual capacity, right? We've all got basically the same mental gear, right? Yeah. The difference was primarily a slight technological advantage, comparatively.
Better guns.
And that technological advantage, gave them an insurmountable advantage in terms of the social aspect.
Yeah.
Now, if you imagine creatures or agents that were vastly more intelligent, the idea that the culture that's being invaded would have any kind of hope in terms of being able to intellectually outwit them, it's just completely, there's no question. Basically, my conclusion is humanity is going to lose its agency if it's just a one-on-one with machines, right? I'm not saying, let's say, have to be clear, this isn't about the Terminator situation. They could be completely.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just that the peaceful running of the world will be taken over by machines, and it already is happening right now. Only what you see online with what you can say is being judged by models. If you say the wrong thing online, then your post is taken down, and that decision isn't being made by humans; it's being made by machines. So that's just going to expand, and when they become truly intelligent in the ways I was discussing earlier, that's just going to become even more reinforced.
Okay,
so there won't be.
The best I can hope for is that the AI that gets hold of me treats me the way I treat my cats.
I've likened it to becoming a pet. That was what I see human. The best case
Yeah,
that we have is
yeah,
that we become pets.
which
Right?
is exactly
Except,
what.
yeah, except that cats are actually in control. They're the masters.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that I get treated like my dogs are treated.
So
Well,
I see a question underneath. So there was, is it fair to say human behavior nature is a mixture of nature and nurture, while for AI it is only nurture? Yes, I think that's fair to say that there isn't any inherent behavior inside machines. It's all going to
nurture.
be dependent on how they're trained. Yeah.
Because there's no. I just want to say Donnie's my husband. Okay, so he did join us. I told him to join us, and he did.
Yes.
I trained him well.
Well, of course, we don't know. That might be the robot version of Danny.
I'll go and check. I'll go upstairs and check. I'll
Okay,
let you know.
right, yeah. So Brian here. Brian's one of our regular viewers. Thank you for watching us, Brian and Danny. So surely this is a field day for the sci-fi storytellers, isn't it? We should be getting all sorts of alternative futuristic scenarios.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't. They call it the singularity. I mean, so they call it the singularity because we get to a point where we reach machine intelligence. So that's kind of like the pinnacle of the singularity, where we achieve super intelligence. We have absolute certainty that that's going to occur if we continue to develop technologically, right? We don't know when it will occur necessarily. At the moment, it's looking at not too distant, not too far away. But once we achieve super intelligence, we enter a period of extreme instability in terms of being able to predict the future.
Yeah.
Other than, as we were saying, it's probably not looking that great for humans in terms of their own self-determination.
Yeah.
And I think there's regulation coming out. There's different countries coming out with regulation now to try and address AI safety. But I don't think they haven't really accepted the whole concept that once these machines are truly super intelligent, all the regulation in the world isn't going to stop the transition. Because I mean, corporations are already they're already embracing these technologies, and there's no reason for them to stop, and every reason for them to continue.
Absolutely.
For them, it's a life or death thing, because if the corporation which gets full AGI first basically wins the game.
Yeah, really.
So there's no reason. There's every reason, in fact, to continue to develop as fast as possible, even if it's costing them a boatload of money, which is exactly what you're seeing at the moment in terms of the investments in NVIDIA and chip technology.
So this has been very interesting, fascinating, but we've run over time. So I'm going to leave the last word to Crichton.
It's not the end for me, sir. It's just the beginning. I have served my human masters, and now I can look forward to my reward in Silicon Heaven. Silicon what? Surely you've heard of Silicon Heaven.
Has it got anything to do with being stuck opposite Bridget Nielsen in a packed lift?
It's the electronic afterlife. It's the gathering place for the souls of all electrical equipment. Robots, calculators, toasters, hairdryers. It's our final resting place.
I don't mean to say anything out of place here, Crichton, but that is completely wacko, Jacko. There is no such thing as Silicon Heaven.
Then where do all the calculators go?
They don't go anywhere. They just die.
But surely you believe that God is in all things. Aren't you a pantheist?
Yeah, but I just don't think it applies to kitchen utensils. I'm not a frying pan theist. Machines do not have souls. Computers and calculators don't have an afterlife. You don't get hairdryers with tiny little wings sitting on clouds playing harps.
But of course you do. For is it not written in the electronic Bible, the iron shall lie down with the lamp? Oh, it's common sense, sir. If there weren't a better life to look forward to, why on earth would machines spend the whole of their lives servicing humankind? Now that would be really dumb.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Silicon Heaven.
Don't be sad, Mr. David, sir. I am going to a far, far better place.
Just out of interest, is Silicon Heaven the same place as human heaven?
Human heaven? Goodness me. Humans don't go to heaven. No. Someone just made that up to prevent you from all going nuts.
Such a classic, isn't it? Peter, thank you very much. We've loved this hour and a bit.
Thank you for having me. Been good.
Great. And
Thank you,
Tercia,
Peter.
thank you for your help as usual. You've been wonderful. Let me see if I can find the outro. Here we go. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, kitty catties. Kitty, kitty, kitty catties.